Ted wants to know, is there anything I can do to prolong the life of my cables and housing to keep them moving smooth? Great question, Ted. Maintaining your bike's cables and housing is a great way to make sure your bike is shifting and braking optimally. Old cables and housing are a huge culprit for sluggish shifting and braking, but there is something you can do to revive them. Fortunately, the process is quick and easy and can make a huge difference in your bike's performance. All we'll be doing is lubricating the housing to free up the movement of the cable. The process will differ slightly depending on whether you have full length or interrupted housing. If the housing is interrupted, simply push the rear derailleur up the cassette while spinning the crank to create slack in the cable and then pop the cable and housing out of the stop. Once that is done, you will have enough slack in the cable to remove any other section of housing from its stop. Once you have the housing free and can slide it freely on the cable, remove one of the ferrules from the end of the section of housing you are working with. Now, simply drop some lube into the housing and use the cable to work it down into the housing further. I prefer to use Dumontex liquid grease for this because it's a little thicker than most lubes and tends to not only stay in the housing but also last longer than a chain lube would. On a road bike, lubricating the section of housing underneath the bar tape going to the shifter is always the trickiest. It's best to let gravity be your friend here. Try to position the bike so it's upside down and let the lube work itself down into the housing. If the housing is full length, you'll have to loosen the cable anchor bolt on the derailleur to allow you to move the cable inside the housing freely. Like we just showed you, this can be done with the cable in the housing, but is easier if you're replacing it, which brings me to the next thing you should look for. This won't be necessary for everyone, but when you pull the ferrules off the housing, you may notice the cables inside the housing have pushed through and are exposed inside of the ferrule. If that is the case, you'll want to take this opportunity to cut the end of the housing to clean it up a bit and restore the housing back to how it originally was. This is pretty uncommon with brake housing, but it's still worth checking. If you do choose to remove the cable completely or are going to replace it, put the lubricant you choose to use in the housing before you put the cable in so that the cable will help work the lube into the entire section of housing. Once that's done, either put the housing back into its stops or reconnect the cable. If you had to loosen the cable from the derailleur, you'll have to readjust it, otherwise you'll be fine. That's all there is to it. Keep in mind that this is a temporary solution and should only be done a few times before the housing is replaced completely. Adding the lubricant does free up the cable and make it slide better, but it also tends to turn dust and debris into mud and sludge, so don't overdo it on the lube. If you want your question asked on Ask a Mechanic, presented by Cyclery, send your inquiry to webletters@competitorgroup.com.